Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession. This podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. I'm Stacey Eldridge, and as always, my co-host Becky Passmore is here with me. And we are diving into digital evidence that cracks cases wide open. This is true crime with a tech twist.
Yes.
Becky, what do we have going on tonight?
Well, we have a special guest with us tonight, as you can see. You've heard us mention him many times on the show. Probably the most common person we mention on our show. And now he's here to talk about a case he worked that an extremely rare and that is extremely rare and only happens about once a year in the United States. So we've got Mark Johnson with us tonight. Thanks for being with us, Mark. We're very excited to have you, especially since we talk about you all the time.
Oh, that's very nice. Thanks, ladies. I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be on your show.
Yeah, and before we dive into the facts of this case and the evidence, I do want to give a quick trigger warning. This case involves fetal abduction by maternal evisceration. Now, in this case, thankfully, the baby survives, but the subject of this case had previously discussed some child loss as well, and that might come up as we discuss some of the evidence. So I just wanted to drop that quick warning for our listeners.
Yes, we want to make sure that you're aware that, this discussion could be a little more detailed in those areas. So, Mark, for our listener, can you just briefly introduce yourself and just tell them your professional background?
Sure. Well, I started out like a lot of us as a police officer in the Missouri Police Department. Was in the field for a number of years. I was in the SWAT team for a few years. I made sergeant, and I also had a kind of side business. I built computers back when people really didn't, it was kind of a nerdy thing. You didn't tell people you did that stuff. It was in the closet, so to speak. And so built computers for people, worked on their internet and hooked them up. And one particular day, I was actually in crime scene investigations at the time. A sergeant in homicide said, "Hey, remember that homicide we had with those 5 victims?" He says, "We've got a guy over in Kansas looking at the computer this guy had there to see what he was doing on the computer while he was waiting for each one of these victims to come in over a 3-day period." He says, "It's called computer forensics. Have you ever heard of that?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of that at all. I've been doing computer work for a number of years." He goes, "Well, apparently when you delete something off a computer, it doesn't really go away." What?
Mind
Never heard that
blown.
before. Yeah, completely. So I found that absolutely fascinating, started digging into it a little bit and doing some research and realized this computer forensics was huge on the East and West Coast. And there was a government-sponsored class, I'm sure you probably went to it, the National White Collar Crime Center's Basic Data Recovery course. We're all nodding because we all know very well about it. And you could go to that if you just got a letter signed by your chain of command. So I went to my chain of command and I said, "Hey, this is kind of important. I think we're going to start needing to do computer forensics here. I've got a computer background. I'd like to go to this class. It's free." And he was not a computer guy. And he was my major. And he said, "No, we don't have one of those. We don't need to do that. You just go back to work."
Oh,
Well,
gosh.
I guess I could have done that, but it kind of ticked me off, So I called the people at NW3C and they said, "Listen, if you can get yourself out here and pay for your own way and pay for your hotel, we'll let you take the class for free." Well, I took that class for free, and man, again, mind blown. It was fantastic intro into, formatting, file systems, finding data. I just absolutely loved it. And so I made a point to go to this same major every couple months and say, "There's this new class coming out and I'd like to go to it," to have him yell at me and tell me to go back to work. And after about 8 months, I had 3 certifications, and I had built my own forensic computer and gotten some software to do forensics. And he screamed at me a couple more times that he didn't want me here talking about it, but I was actually shown some mercy by the training division, who let me actually teach a class on computer forensics, an intro class. And we brought in 60 people from a 4-state region. And shortly thereafter, I got to start the computer forensics lab at the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. So
Yeah,
Very
you were all
nice.
in.
yeah, and then from there, I ended up going to work for a vendor for a year teaching EnCase, as many of us have used over the years. And then from there, I went to work for the United States Attorney's Office here in Kansas City, and I was assigned to the FBI's Regional Computer Forensics Lab.
Which is how we
And that-
met you.
Yep.
And that's how we got involved. And Becky, you and I have done a case together. You know, Stacy, you and I have consulted on a number of cases over the years. And then I ended up going to work for Kroll, following Becky to Kroll, and we had a couple of years there doing cyber investigations. But I really kind of was at the end of my career, so I decided to start my own company called Rockridge Forensics. I did that for 2 years, and I retired last week. I'm done. So that's in a nutshell.
That's great.
And now you're just going to be pickleballing and podcasting in your
Lots
free time,
of
right?
pickleball, little podcasting on my own podcast, my own podcast, which is just an audio podcast, Computer Crime Chronicles, and fishing. Yep, that's it. That's it for me.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the fishing. My apologies.
Don't forget the fishing. Caught a trout
you're-
today.
Good. So you're going to start back up on your podcast.
Yeah, I've got a case that's really a good one. I talked to Mark Spencer from, I'm forgetting the name of his company right now, but Arsenal.
Yeah,
Arsenal.
that case
And
is crazy.
those guys have done a tremendous case with some computer evidences off the planet. I've got one in the box, and you just need to kind of get it out now.
Great. That'd be
Awesome.
So I'm having
yeah,
fun.
we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so
Okay.
people can check out all the good work you're doing on your podcast as well.
That's
Sounds
right.
great. Thank you.
And then, so I think you kind of covered, you've been in digital forensics for a while. Now, as we get started off in this case, is there any limits about anything you can't say, or is it all on the table here?
No, it's pretty much all on the table. This case has been adjudicated. The suspect has been addressed and taken care of, and we can get into that as we go through it. I don't think there's anything that would keep me from talking in any part of it. I may want to be careful, or I will be careful about how graphic I get, because it is a very graphic case in some cases, but I want to really focus on the forensics, and hopefully your audience can get a little bit from the forensic analysis I did.
Yeah, and that's typically how we roll on this podcast. We want to focus on the evidence, but obviously we've got to give some background of the actual crime, and you'll be respectful and not make it super gory and gross. And
No, I may
detail
say
every little gross
one
thing.
kind of gross thing, but it's part of the story. You have to
Yeah.
say it, or they wouldn't
Yeah.
understand.
So why is this case particularly significant or instructive from your perspective?
Well, for me personally, it was probably the most important case I'd ever worked. It was a homicide involving a 28-year-old woman. It was forensically fascinating because I was able to develop a timeline from all the data I was finding, all the artifacts I was finding on the suspect's computer. And even identifying who the suspect was something one of my other examiners did by looking at the victim's computer. And then, of course, when it is a homicide, you're going to court. They're not really
Yeah.
going to plead to many homicides in this case. So I wanted to make sure my evidence was solid. I could back up what I was saying using testing and validation along the way. And I think we came out with a really good product at the end and got a conviction. So.
yeah. Okay. Well, Mark, walk us into this case. What happened?
Well, this was the Bobby Jo Stinnett murder. Bobby Jo Stinnett was a 20-year-old female from Skidmore, Missouri. Now, Skidmore's got a little history of things that happen. I'll let the audience take a look at Skidmore sometime if they want to. But she lived there with her husband, Zeb. They married, obviously. They both worked at the Harley-Davidson plant, and she was 8-ish months pregnant with their first child. My understanding, the child's sex was unknown at the time. I don't think they knew it at the time. And as a hobby, Bobby Jo and Zeb, to some degree, raised and bred rat terrier dogs. And as part of that, they belonged to, especially Bobby Jo, she belonged to a rat terrier message board. I think it was called Ratter Chatter, but don't hold me to that name, where she posted many, many times to her friends, and they had a whole community all about raising rat terriers. So on December 5th, 2004, 21 years, almost 22 years ago,
Yeah.
Bobby Jo received some communication through the message board of a woman named Darlene Fisher. Her email was fisher4kids@hotmail.com about purchasing a rat terrier dog from her because apparently they lived in roughly the same vicinity. At one point, Bobby Jo said, why don't you give me a call? We'll talk. And And Miss Fisher said, no, I don't really want to do that. I'm not great on the phone. My English isn't good, or something along those lines. But they made an appointment for the next day, December 16th, for Miss Fisher to visit Bobby Jo and look at the dogs and possibly make a purchase.
So the message, are these on public message boards? Like everybody could see the back and forth of these, or was it some sort of like private chat situation?
I don't know if it was strictly a membership, and if it wasn't paid. It was kind of an open message board, I think, that you could get on there, become a member, and then you could post and read posts and go through almost kind of like a Facebook message board kind of thing. But all about
so anybody was
dogs.
In there could see the whole conversation going back and forth between them?
Yes. It was not, you could choose to do private, but yeah, a lot of the messages were obviously public and readable by everybody.
Okay.
And that came into effect very quickly after the murder occurred. So on December 16th, I think around maybe early afternoon, Bobby Jo was on the phone with her mother. Her mother worked at a convenience store about a mile away from her house. And as she's talking to her, she says, "Oh, I've got to go. They've arrived, or they're here. The buyer's here now." So she gets off the phone. Well, her mother doesn't hear from her for a couple hours and gets a little bit worried, can't get her on the phone. So she comes down to the house. And when she goes in, she sees an incredible scene, obviously a very, very bloody scene. And Bobby Jo is dead on the floor. And it appears that her fetus, her baby, has been cut from her womb. Now, that's about as graphic as I'm going to get. There's a lot more that could be said here, but I just don't think the audience really needs to get into that part when we're talking about the computer forensics.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, this is December 16th, 2004. Huge police response. This is kind of a rural area, too, up in Skidmore, a small town. Very quickly, they're gathering information. They're doing search warrants. They actually grab Bobby Jo's computer. But one of the biggest things was the local law enforcement wanted to put out an Amber Alert for the child. Well,
sure.
Amber Alert said, can't do it. We don't know what the child is. They didn't. They just knew it was a fetus because they didn't know the sex of the child. Wow. And a congressman, Sam Graves from that area, stepped forward and said, you're going to do it, basically. First time in history, an Amber Alert was sent out nationwide from a fetus that they didn't know the sex of, which was extremely interesting. But that made headlines really, really quickly. Fast forwarded to the morning of December 17th. We're getting ready to look at that computer of Bobby Jo's, and a tip comes in from one of the people on the Rat Terrier message board who says, hey, this girl, Darlene Fisher, made an appointment to see or to buy a dog from her, I think, yesterday afternoon. And they said, okay, it's very interesting. Well, so Jeff Owen, who's just walking in the door, basically, he's a detective for the State Highway Patrol, and he's part of the RCFL. You remember Jeff?
Yeah.
Funny guy, good guy. He looks at Bobby Jo's computer, does a search for Darlene or Fisher of that kind, and ends up finding a number of cached web pages. Every single post is cached in an HTML web page, which is fantastic for him. And he finds these, and he finds the one where she's talking about getting with Bobby Jo about this dog, and each one of those posts is tagged with an IP address.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, and Mark, do you want to tell our listeners what a cached web page is?
Sure. So when you're online and you're browsing, you go to sailboats.com and you're looking at sailboats. Every page that comes up is actually saved to your computer in some form, so that if you want to get back to it quickly, it doesn't have to go back to the internet and then come back down and look at it and download it each time. So it's cached to your local computer or saved to your local computer in a temporary folder. And then when you click back, boom, it comes up right away. So it's a speed thing for the user.
Mm-hmm.
So these cached web pages were great because they had these posts. Now this IP address, IP address is an internet protocol address. Basically, a telephone number for a computer can be found out where, what it belongs to or who leased it. So law enforcement, the FBI and local law enforcement, contact the service provider for the internet in the area, and they say, here's what we've got. We're going to send you a subpoena, but we really need this information quickly. And that service provider was not really law enforcement friendly up to this point for months. We always had a hard time getting information from them. There's always stall tactics or whatever you want to call it. But right off the bat, they said, not a problem. Here's the information. Send me the subpoena when you can. They obviously recognize the importance of this. They sent us the leasee of that IP address, and it came back to a Kevin Montgomery in Melbourne, Kansas. Okay, so now local law enforcement, they're investigating the case along with the FBI task force who's on the case. They respond to Kevin Montgomery's house.
In a different town.
In Melbourne, Kansas.
Than the Darlene.
Yeah. Though Darlene Fisher at this point has not said where she's from. just as she lived around the
okay.
area of Skidmore.
Okay.
So we don't know if that's even true, basically. But there's a little bit of, I think I've got to, we'll address that briefly here later on. But when they get there, they find Lisa Montgomery holding a newborn baby. And one of the agents goes, "Hey, can I see your baby?" You know, and okay, takes the baby aside, and another agent and police officer, detective start talking to her. And it's evident very quickly that she's kind of not telling the truth. I mean, when did you have the baby? Oh, I just had it yesterday. Where? Here at home. At home? I mean, that's kind of strange. And sometime during that conversation, she actually said she had discarded the placenta out in the woods. Well, this wasn't making any sense at all. About this time, her husband's parents are pulling up the driveway when Lisa Montgomery sees them. She panics and says, "Get me out of here. Just get me out of here. I'll tell you what you ever want to know. Just get me out of here." So, okay, great. They go and they're going to do a voluntary talk with her. And basically, by the end of the night, she gives a confession of sorts of what she did of this case. Right now, we've got something. They obviously arrest her. They hold her on that at the time. And then my job starts. So I got the computer. I was assigned the computer literally, I think, that day or the next day on Lisa Montgomery's Apple iMac. Remember the old iMacs that are all one piece with a different color shells?
Yes.
That's what it was. Back when Netscape Navigator browser was still
Right.
popular. And Internet
Right.
Explorer had just started being released. So,
Wow.
yeah.
And so we've had two different women's names, right? On the message board, we saw a Darlene Fisher, but then you go to this house in a different town from the victim, and her name is Lisa Montgomery.
Correct. So
And
the
she
IP
just
address
says-
came back to Kevin Montgomery, or the
Uh-huh.
house. Lisa
Yeah.
Montgomery's holding the baby.
Yeah.
And
And then she says, "Take me with you."
yeah. So I guess I can tell you this. There was some pictures that we recovered from, I don't think it was from the computer. I think it was from a digital camera of the day before the police got there. So the 16th, the day of the murder, Lisa Montgomery with the baby in her lap, and she's reading some kind of a paper letter. And you can see there's something under her fingernails, and you zoom in, and it was Bobby Jo's blood under her fingernails.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just so your audience knows, the baby, completely healthy. The only thing wrong with this baby, Lisa Montgomery had no skill, no background training in nursing, nothing, and was able to get that baby without damaging it except for one small scratch on one eyelid, and that's it. Beautiful little baby. Yeah. So that was amazing in and of itself. So then, obviously, considerations on my point here, I'm going to have to do a forensic analysis. I'm going to try to develop this timeline, try to answer the questions being asked me by prosecuting attorneys, of which they were federal. They decided to go federal on this case. The the U.S. attorney was very high on doing this case, and it was going to be a death penalty case, which was
And that's
interesting.
because it crossed the state line, right?
Correct, because it crossed state lines. That's exactly right, Becky. So I felt obviously the weight of that. You know, if I'm going to go in and do this, I'm going to make sure I dot all my I's and cross all my T's and stuff. But I'm very interested to get in this. So obviously, I make a forensic image of the hard drive, and even during my analysis of this, and of course, analysis took at least a month that I can recall at this point, being 21 years ago or so, because I wanted to do as much as I could and as accurate as I could. So I even bought an iMac computer off of eBay for $10. And then I restored the forensic image I had created to another hard drive and placed it in that, just so I can not only do the forensic analysis using my tools, EnCase, Internet Evidence Finder and all those tools, but I could also see what she saw by booting the computer live without ever touching or changing the original evidence. So that was a big help as well as we move forward throughout this investigation.
Did you make any exhibits for the trial from having that ability to boot up her hard?
I don't think I did.
Experience? Oh, okay.
I don't think I did, Stacy, because it just, the forensic analysis, the artifacts were so good, I didn't have to. Yeah. But for me, it was nice just to see it the way she saw it, just in case I missed something or something did pop out extraordinary they'd want to see.
Yeah.
So what was important for me initially was obviously internet history. We had internet history, and we wanted to be able to see that. I did a couple searches. I don't remember what they were for, most likely Darlene or something like that, to pull back internet history. And what I found was hundreds and hundreds of the exact same internet history entry. So let's say on today's date, the 7th, at 15:55 hours, you went to Chevy.com. I found 100 entries, exactly that entry. And so I
Amazing.
had to actually have a special EnCase script created to run that to recover all the allocated and all the unallocated space. And the output was enormous. So I couldn't put it into Excel because it would only do like 1 million lines or 650,000 lines at the time. So we ended up hiring a guy who was good with Access to take that history and then filter it down to just one of each actual entry, which brought that size down a lot. But it gave me the timeline from, even prior to 2004, of all the internet history they had found. So then the question becomes, and I didn't want to get caught flat-footed, why did the internet history get saved this way?
Yeah, why
Well,
was it in there 100
yeah.
times if they just went to the website one time?
Yeah,
Or
so I wanted to have
maybe they went there,
exactly.
But you knew
Or
enough
did
from
they
looking at
go
it.
there? Is this from something else? It's all those
Yeah.
questions you have to
Oh,
answer.
yeah.
So
Got to be prepared.
me and another examiner at the lab, very, very smart guy, way smarter than me, we talked about it a lot, started doing a little research, and then started looking into and a little testing. We looked into the Apple formatting, which at the time I think they were using B-tree formatting. Now, it's not important for the audience what's B-tree. The point about Apple was try not to have fragmented files. So if I write a Word document or I make a picture or I do a movie, you don't want it to exist in cluster 4, cluster 10, cluster 100, cluster 2000. You want it to be, because if it does that, your read head on your computer has to go to all those locations to bring back one video, one document, and it takes longer. So Apple was really good about wanting all their stuff to be sequential. Cluster 2 to cluster 600 is all index history. So they were very careful about that. In doing so, what they'd end up doing then is, let's just say, and the internet history at this point was Internet Explorer, so it was an index.dat file. If you remember the old days, folks, all of our index.dat files in our internet history, that was the file that saved internet history. So let's just say it's 10 meg, all right? And you're typing away and you're using the internet, and then you shut your computer down or close the browser, and then you come back the next day and you bring it back up. The first thing that Apple does, or the computer does, is says, okay, they want to get it in internet history. Let's see where it's at. Is there any place to grow on the back side of it? Is there open clusters on the back side to put stuff? If it doesn't find what it thinks is enough area to grow, it takes the entire index.dat, copies it into a new location on the hard drive that does have area to grow, and then deletes the first copy. But by delete, we don't mean get rid of. We just mean
Gone forever. It's not.
mark it by deleted. It's still there. We're just going to ignore it like it's not there. Okay. And so that's what happened. Every time they shut down internet history, it would come back up the next time they brought it up, and it would make a duplicate. And so it just kept growing and growing in unallocated space, which is why I had all these hundreds and hundreds of the exact same entries. So that was kind of a nice little hurdle to get over rather quickly. Questions to this point?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm going to kind of look at my little cheat sheet over here too. So some of the best data I found, again, looking at that timeline feature, was found in email. I looked at email, looked at pictures, internet history, keyword searches, things like that. But email turned out by and large to be probably the biggest thing I was able to find information on. So one of the first questions I had was, how did Lisa Montgomery know Bobby Jo Stinnett was pregnant?
Great
Well,
question.
Yeah.
I found an email. I actually think it was a deleted email, and where it talks about here we are at Abilene, Kansas dog show, everybody showing their dog, and then listing Lisa Montgomery's name and her daughter's name, and then some other people's name, and then Bobby Jo Stinnett's name, and then Zeb's name. And then I found in unallocated space very close to that an actual picture. And so I pulled out then, recovered that picture, and sure as heck, there they all listed in that. Well, that was from Abilene, this is 2004 in April. Well, if you do the timeline, it's roughly 8 months till the murder took place. So we believe that that was probably when she found out she was letting people know she's pregnant. First child, they usually they don't usually wait a whole lot of times. They just say, we don't know that for a fact, but we believe that was the time that Lisa Montgomery found that out. Also at the same time as Lisa Montgomery is at that dog show because she's also part of this rat terrier message board that Bobby Jo Stinnett spends a great deal of time on with her dogs and marketing them and talking about them and stuff like that. So they know each other from there. She obviously knows Lisa Montgomery. She doesn't know she's Darlene Fisher, obviously, at this point. But that's kind of where the timeline starts, is that Abilene, Kansas dog show. And being able to find that picture is really, really cool. So we also found an email, or I should say I found an email where Lisa Montgomery had signed up for Pampers.com. Okay. So, and a whole bunch of other things leading one to believe she was pregnant. Well, the problem with Lisa Montgomery is she was always pregnant, but they're all fake. I think we documented 7 different false pregnancies that she said she had. It became from people, what they were saying is that she liked the attention. She really liked the attention that people would shower on her when, well, I'm pregnant. Oh, you're pregnant. Oh, you're thing, and she'd get all the talk about how great it was to be pregnant and things like that. But there was always an excuse at the end. Well, we lost the baby due to an RH disease, or I had a miscarriage or something else. So there's a lot of emails where she was getting, where she was talking to people from the Rat Terrier message board, posting, just telling myself to calm down, to keep my baby calm. Oh, you're pregnant. And then the conversation ensued about babies and things like that. Found a lot of those emails back and forth. The important part about that was, she says she's pregnant. We know she's not pregnant. Why did she need a baby now? What was the big push why we needed the baby right now? Well, she was divorced. She had, I think, 2 children of her own, teenagers, one older, one younger. And she was divorced from her husband. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but she had been kind of messing with him on the visitation. He lived in a different town, maybe hour and a half away. He'd make arrangements to come see the kids on a day, or pick them up. He'd come there. The house would be locked up. Nobody'd be home. He'd call her on the phone. She wouldn't answer. He'd finally end up leaving, and then she'd call him later and say, well, why didn't you come pick up the kids? And he did. And just the frustration of playing that game kind of ticked him off. So I found an email from him to her where he says, how would Kevin, his parents, or the community react when they find out that you were never pregnant and that you have lied about so much to so many? You have to prove it. False documents will be a felony. It will feel like the whole world is coming down on you. That is enough to allow the kids to stay with me. This would be good, premeditation as to why she needed a child right now. Also, the community was not kind of buying her stuff anymore, because she'd say she's pregnant, they'd get excited, and then no baby would materialize. So they started doubting that as well. But with this particular one, the question arose, well, how did he know she wasn't pregnant? He was there when she had her tubes tied. I don't know what the official word of that is now, tubal ligation or whatever it is right now, but she can't have kids. And he was there when it happened. So he knew that she didn't do it. Now, this could have been enough impetus for her to, I got to show up with a kid now. And so then she starts playing the game of, I'm pregnant. In one particular photo she sent to one of the other message boards she was on, she and her husband had gone to the Renaissance Festival, and he was sitting in a chair with the king's hat on, and she's in the queen's outfit, and she's literally leaning over like 10 degrees, like I am right now. But in the caption, she says, real difficult to bend over when you're this much pregnant. It's hard on me. Well, I've been with pregnant women. My wife was a pregnant woman at one time. You can bend over 10 degrees and you're not really stressing anything. So it just seemed like there was always the motive behind the email was to get people to pay attention to her. So that was quite interesting when that happened. Questions? Good. Excellent. We'll grab a little quick here. So one of the other things I found fascinating, probably one of the best things in this case, was she had been showing, or reported to me that she had been showing an ultrasound around town of her child. So I started looking through all the pictures. Again, an email in unallocated space. Was it an email? I think it was an email, or maybe it's just a picture. A picture in unallocated space of an ultrasound. And it had a name on it, and it was not Lisa Montgomery in the lower left corner. However, I found an almost identical ultrasound, almost in the same proximity, and in the lower corner that other name had been changed in a very bad graphic modification software. I'm not sure what they were using, a black box with Lisa Montgomery and then her local hospital in it with a completely different font that did look different than all the other fonts on the screen showing an ultrasound. And so I thought, well, that's really interesting. So luckily I was able to do a little bit more work. And just after that file, again, B-Tree was so good. It was keeping the attachments, the email, the metadata from the printing all in the same area. Well, I just had for the picture.
So it makes it all together like you did this.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I'm able to kind of just look in this, right. It's this whole timeline thing. So, but the great part was this graphic or this information I pulled out in very formatted text of like an EMF file. Remember the enhanced meta files we found when we printed the document that said it printed? This was like an early enhanced meta file. It had the printer, who was an Epson. It had the user who was logged on, Lisa Montgomery. It even had the date, I think, and it also had the name of the picture that was being printed. Well,
good stuff.
I won't say the name of the picture just to protect the people whose originally picture this was, but I found the name. Let's just call it my baby's ultrasound.jpg. I did a search on the internet for my baby's ultrasound.jpg. I found a hit on the Wayback Machine, which is archive.org, which for those of you who don't know, stores old versions of web pages that companies have. So you may have a company that's been around for a year, may have 10, 15 different backups, and you might find a company that's been around for 20 years might have hundreds of different backups of their websites. And sometimes you see the information, sometimes you don't. Well, in this particular one, it didn't have the picture, but it had the picture name on it and stuff, and it had obviously the person's website it was. That person just happened to work for the United States Attorney's Office in a different city.
Wow.
So I called him. I called him up on the phone, said, "What's this ultrasound?" "That's my wife's ultrasound. We put them on our webpage, for our families could see it and everything else." I said, "Do you still have the picture?" He said, "Yeah." He sent me the picture. I MD5 hashed that picture, and it matched the same unmodified one I found on Lisa Montgomery's computer.
Wow.
So I was able to show that she went out, found that picture through a search, and put it on here, and then modified it with her own information, printed it, and then was showing around town the picture of her ultrasound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Go in the extra step and be like, I don't know where it came from. Let me see if I can find out where it came from.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was really, really cool. I really had a
And
good
using
time with
open source, right? Like just using the internet to look for it.
That's right. The Wayback Machine. I mean, I'm not even sure a lot of people, forensic examiners, know about the Wayback Machine, but it is awesome to find stuff you want to know that for a website that maybe it doesn't have the information that you think it should have or had at one time or whatever. It's a great tool though. So I really like using it. And again, open source.
We talked about how it was a missed opportunity that they didn't use it during the Casey Anthony trial to show some of the stuff she was looking at in terms of exhibits.
That's a very astute observation, Stacy. But you always were the smart one. So.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, so let's see. I got that done. Another part of this case that was interesting is Kevin Montgomery was kept completely in the dark by her. He'd want to go to doctor's visits with her. I got a doctor visit. Oh, I'll take the day off. I'll go with you. An extremely nice guy, even during the trial. He'd come out in the hall, he would smile, he'd nod his head at you and smile. Just a really good guy, But she kept him completely in the dark. She was a master manipulator, in my opinion, and other opinions of people I know. And she would say, "Well, I'm not feeling good this morning, so I don't think I'm going to go. So you can go to work." Well, he'd go to work, and then he'd come home, and she says, "Well, I started feeling better, so I went to head to the doctor's office. Everything's fine." And then she'd produce fake doctor's papers that she downloaded off the internet and, signed a fake doctor's name and stuff and show him to, kind of. So it really bothered him that he didn't get to kind of, enjoy being part of it. But we found a lot of that kind of stuff where she was always keeping him in the dark about something, and he wanted to be involved, and she just wouldn't let him be involved, obviously, because she's not really pregnant. So there was no doctor visits. We talked about the ultrasound. Another thing that was quite interesting was the keyword searches that she did that I was found out. We know even today, looking at keyword searches is looking right through their window of their living room to see what people are doing. So we love keyword searches to really takes you into the mind of the person you're investigating. She did searches for, and this is again over roughly an 8-month period, and you can almost see the timeline of what she's thinking. Unassisted home birth, emergency C-section. She actually tried to view a C-section video, but we don't think her download speed was good enough. She didn't actually view the video that we could tell, but she tried to. Emergency C-section, 26-week home birth, ultrasound 15-week, ultrasound twin 4-month. Now that was interesting. We did not know it, but some of the people she talked to, we didn't know it from the beginning. Some of the people she was corresponding with, she told them she was having twins, and others she'd say she was just having a single baby. So that always got us figuring out. We never actually found any evidence of it. Was she also looking at another have twins? I mean, was that part of this as well? We didn't know. We didn't find evidence of it, but that was kind of interesting to see that. Ultrasound twin 16-week. Oh, and by the way, that whole twin thing comes up again in the email I'll read here toward the end. Registering birth. She wants to know how to register birth.
Oh, yeah.
Pitocin and oxytocin. Those are drugs that assist in bringing on labor. She looked for those as well. And then she also searched for blocking number caller ID, which will become apparent here as we get towards the date of the actual homicide. So it was very interesting, like I said, piecing this together in a timeline that I could document, that I could then testify in court. But you always look at this stuff and you think premeditation. Is there premeditation? Is there premeditation? So one of the emails that I thought really highlighted this most is an email that I found, and I think it was allocated, but I don't remember for sure. But the email went out to a number of people, and I'm just going to read it. I had doctor visit this morning. Some of you may remember we lost a daughter at birth about 1.5 years ago due to extreme Rh disease as well as other complications. This time with 2, while I get to visit doc quite often, blood teeter tests have become the norm. I've made it to term, but have faced the possible loss of one of the babies. So this is the people who think she's having twins.
Okay.
We have known for some time, but it was made real this morning with only 1 heartbeat. Ultrasound confirmed this soon after. We could have delivered before now, but time was being granted for remaining baby to grow stronger, as they were both very small. I know nothing else could be done that my doctors have not already considered. Never went to a doctor.
Right.
I am to go in tomorrow for medication to ripen my cervix, and then if nothing, on Thursday they will induce. Thursday was the date of the homicide.
Wow.
So premeditation?
Right. And it's going to have a baby on Thursday.
Yep.
Not
Went to
delivering.
the
Pretty bad.
victim's
Pretty
house
bad.
on Thursday.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a biggie, obviously. And of course, I'm documenting this. I'm keeping the U.S. attorney involved in the case up to speed on the entire thing as we go through. So at this point, we're kind of down to how is internet history going to play out into the end part of this investigation. One of the questions the assistant U.S. attorney on the case said, "Hey, you found all this deleted internet history. Can we prove she deleted it, or is it just like there's a setting that automatically gets rid of it after 30 days?" I go, that's a really good question. In the end, I could not find a setting in Internet Explorer that showed that it was parsed after 30 days or whatever else. But what's really cool is the last 3 days, I could tell you what was deleted because she was selectively deleting internet history as it applied to certain things. The creation of the
how
Darlene.
do you know that? Yeah.
Exactly. So I had 2 spreadsheets, one with allocated and one with unallocated and allocated. And as you look through them, as you're going through them, all of a sudden, boop, she deleted any reference to the creation of the Darlene Fisher Hotmail account. Did find that in unallocated space, though. Deleted.
Yeah.
It was there. She deleted all the reference from that on the 15th, the day before the murder. She also did a search for Fairfax, Missouri, which is kind of in the area, I'm told, of Skidmore. And so she deleted a search for that area. I think she's maybe looking for directions or something. I don't know. But she deleted that. And I think there was one other thing she deleted. Oh, references to blocking caller ID. So when she had that typed conversation with Bobby Jo Stinnett, and Bobby said, "Well, let's just call me," and she made up an excuse. She was searching for blocking caller ID. And so those references were deleted too. And again, everything else was there. There was history after these and before them, but those selected things were deleted. So absolutely, that's knowledge. That's intent. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolute intent, no questions. So that was pretty interesting as well. The last part of this wasn't really a forensic thing, but it was very interesting. I thought I'd include this. The defense wanted to use a defense of what's called pseudocyesis. Have you ever heard that term?
No.
Pseudocyesis is a condition where a woman believes they're pregnant, even though they're not, but believes it so much that it actually manifests itself in physical form. They can actually have, stop having periods. They can distended belly, almost like they actually are pregnant. But they truly believe it in their minds. I guess it would be a mental condition in some cases. I'm not a doctor. So they wanted the prosecution wanted to be able to, obviously, is there anything we can do, knock that off, that's not a case? Well, I didn't find it forensically. However, the defense gave a stack of paperwork to because of the discovery, a stack of paperwork and books and articles to the U.S. attorney and said, we may use something in there. That was the discovery on this particular thing. We assigned a U.S. attorney to look through every frickin' document and piece of paper in there. And they found a job application from a few months prior to this where it said, "Are you pregnant?" And she said no.
Yeah.
So can't use pseudocyesis then. That's not
even
a good
better
defense.
because they could have made the argument because of her mental state, she blocked out the fact that she knew she had her tubes tied.
Yeah.
But that document that they found would negate that.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it really was great. The other thing that was quite interesting was I want to be careful about what I say here. She had a brother, okay? And the defense wanted to make a case that the brother did this. He was along with her. He did the crime kind of thing.
Mm.
And they actually kind of went whole hog with that at one point. But the interesting part was
that during the trial or like during,
before the trial?
Before the trial, okay.
Yeah, before the trial. Yeah, definitely before the trial. Strategizing. Except the one thing that worked against them was after they took that giant step forward to say certain things was he and her hated each other. She couldn't stand her brother, and she has multiple conversations, emails about how she can't stand her brother. I don't know if she had a order of protection against him or anything, but she couldn't stand her brother. That coupled with the fact that he was in the office of his probation person at the same time this was going on. Yeah, that's not going to work. So
that's a pretty rock solid alibi.
Yeah, he had a pretty good alibi. So that never caught fire either. The nicest thing that could have been said about me was actually during cross-examination of the forensic expert on the other side. He's a good guy. That's one of those forensic guys for the defense I really respect, and still true to this day. I know him pretty well. On cross-examination by the prosecutor to him about my report, because he had opined on my report, she says, "You reviewed Mr. Johnson's analysis?" And he said, "Yes." He says, "Did you find that he made any errors in his analysis?" "No, I didn't." "Did you find that he left any omissions or anything else you found?" "No, I didn't see that." "In fact, did you see anything wrong with his report at all?" And he said, "No." And she says, "No further questions." I thought, that's all right.
Ding,
I'm
ding.
okay. That's why I'm hired, and that's why I consider it important. I don't want to make mistakes. I want to provide the truth just like you two do. And all of the examiners that I know always are about the truth. We're not trying to make stuff up. We're just trying to say the truth and have it presented in the court of law like we're trained. So that was kind of a nice thing to be heard in court. So ended up testifying for about 6.5 hours, and then she was found guilty, obviously, and she was sentenced to death, and that was carried out, I think, a year or two ago. I'm not sure the date.
So she sat there on death row for like 20 years.
She and they came out with their last minute pleas for one thing else. Her roommate said she was a very nice person, such a sweetheart, and all that stuff. But in the end, the governor did not give her stay, and she was, I think, the first woman executed since 1953.
In the state
in
of
the federal
Missouri.
level. That's my story.
That's fantastic. And I remember you telling this to my class, this story to my class, and I believe it was in 2022. And the very next week or the very next month is when she was, she,
executed,
they took, executed her, for her conviction. So yes.
Yeah, it was a sobering case. I was glad I was afforded the opportunity to examine it. And like I said, as you're getting into that evidence and you're piecing it all together and finding things, it's like, this is what computer forensics is about. You go the extra step when you can, try to get that information. And I mean, I've told you guys this for 100 years, people kind of poo-poo on allocated space sometimes, and SSDs don't keep unallocated space nearly as well. But you can still find stuff, and when you do, or pagefile.sys, Becky, our case we worked in on the terrorist case, pagefile, those places are gold mines of information, and I hope your audience who do forensics will concentrate on those.
Yeah, pay attention to those areas.
So, Mark, looking back on your testimony, like, is there anything that you had to testify about that stood out the most in your mind, whether it was because it was really hard to explain and it looked like the jury wasn't getting it, or, just things always happen when you testify? What stands out in your mind?
From what I remember about the jury, I teach this at IASIS, that when you're talking to a jury, you make eye contact with the jury for explanations, not necessary for every yes, that's you look silly doing that. But it's definitely when you're explaining something. I remembered at least one person on the jury two people in the jury were extremely engaged with what I had to say. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't really understand it. They understood the umbrella maybe, but not specifics. But two of them were nodding, and they'd go, "Oh yeah," and they'd give the nod and stuff. So that's always, you're on the right track when you've got at least a couple people on the jury that are getting it. So that was probably one thing I remember from testimony, at least.
Yeah. And then what about cross? Did they try to hit you hard with anything?
No, I think, the guy who did cross for me, he said, did she also do searches that you found for tatting? Tatting is kind of like knitting, I guess, is what I didn't know that until I did this case.
I would have thinking that's getting tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know that. When I saw that, though, I said, what is tatting? I looked it up before we went to trial, and I said, oh, well. But I said, yes, she did that. She did searches for tatting. Oh, I do remember one other thing. What are we taught when we go to testify? Do we say the suspect did anything? No, we say the computer user did this, because
Right.
unless we actually see them doing it or can
Sure,
prove
right.
otherwise that they did it, we try to say this. Well, I started doing that, but he kept saying, isn't it true she did this? And when she did this, da 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 da. So after a while, I just gave up and said, yeah, she did this. You keep saying she did that. So I remember, I do
Was that on the
remember that.
cross or on the direct?
That was on the direct from the defense. So the cross, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't get him off it. He just kept saying, isn't it true when she did a search for this, she could have been meaning this? And I'd say, I don't know what her meaning was when do it, what she was thinking. I just know that there was the search. So I tried for several answers to say, well, the user did X. And after all, I just say, yeah, she did X.
Wow.
So
He didn't object after you just said, yeah, she
no,
did it.
I mean, yeah, he's the one who kept saying her name, not me. So I think that's kind of common. I've seen that before in some cases too, where they reference the person as doing it, and try to put a spin on. Well, it could have meant that they were looking for ways to get downtown to do that. It's like,
Right.
I don't know. I can't testify to what they were thinking. Here's what the
Right.
evidence is. The jury makes that decision. So
That's right.
yeah.
Well, Mark, we really thank you for telling this case and this story and this investigation. And I know that it was very meaningful to the family that you figured all of this information out and were able to be a part of getting this conviction. Have you heard if this child grew up with a loving family? Do you know much about that?
I really don't. I can't even opine. I'm thinking back in my mind, and I don't know anything about the child. I haven't read any books on the subject. No, there's been some books written on it, and obviously, if you go to Wikipedia, you can get a really good in-depth things I didn't even know about the entire case that goes behind it, or the families themselves. But
Yeah. Well,
I didn't
assumption would
reach
be
out.
she would have went back to her father, Zeb, even though
sure,
her mother
yeah, that is the
mother
assumption.
died. So
Yeah, and by all accounts, they were a great couple, very nice
Yeah.
people. A young couple working hard, just trying to live their lives and stuff. So you can imagine, and I'm sure the mothers, Bobby Jo Stinnett's mothers, very engaged as well. I just can't even imagine what that was like for her. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, good. Thank you, Mark. It was great. And we always appreciate you telling stories. We're really glad to have you on this podcast
Yeah.
as we speak your name all the time. And that's just because I feel like you're one of my biggest mentors and you have taught me so much. And I know Stacy says that she rings your phone a lot and uses you in her network to answer a lot of questions. So we appreciate that. So
It's my pleasure. I've loved working with you guys currently and in the past. We've had a great careers in this field. I know all of us are thankful that we learned this stuff in the first place a million years ago. But what a great career to be involved in. Even these days with cell phones kind of taking over for computers and stuff. But you guys are doing great work. Keep it up.
Thank you. All right. Until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us to get notified the next time a new episode drops. If you can do more, head on over to parsingthetruth.com and donate by clicking on the donate button. Parsing the Truth is a nonprofit organization, and we are raising money to send a new digital forensic examiner to IASIS training next year in Orlando. Thanks.